Hello friends, in today's video we are going to discuss two important topics of the consumer protection chapter, that is reliefs available to the consumer and role of consumer organization and non-government organizations. So the relief available. If the consumer court is satisfied about the genuineness of the complaint, it can issue one or more of the following direction to the opposite party. That is, when the consumer wins the case in the court uh, grants various reliefs to the consumer so that he can get justice. So, we are going to discuss the various reliefs available to the consumer according to the Consumer Protection Act. So, let's start. The first relief is to remove the defect in goods or deficiency in service. That is, for example, you buy a washing machine from a electronic showroom and that washing machine is not working properly. It has some defect. So in order to get your justice, you file a case in the consumer court, and the consumer court, after sending that washing machine into the laboratory for testing, and after the final judgment, after believing it that the machine has some defect, the court will order the showroom person to remove the defect in that good. And after removing the after removing that defect and repairing the washing machine, he has to return that washing machine to you. And same thing for service. If there is any deficiency in service, he has to remove that deficiency, like that. So the second point, to replace the defective product with a new one free from any defect. The second relief which is available to the consumer is, for example, you buy a washing machine and it is defective. So the court will order the electronic showroom person to replace that washing machine with another washing machine which is available at the showroom. Uh, so it is like replacing one product with another good product, defective product with a good product which is free from defect. The third point, to refund the price for the product or the charges paid for this service. That is, uh, he has to refund the price of that washing machine. We will take the example of washing machine again. For example, the washing machine cost you 10,000 rupees and the washing machine is full of defect. So the court will order that electronic showroom person to return the full 10,000 rupees. And same thing happened for the service also. The person who has charged you for some service, let it be repairing or any service, so if it is if the service is not proper, it has some deficiency, then he has to pay the charges which you had paid to him in return. So the fourth point, to pay a reasonable amount of compensation for the loss or injury suffered by the consumer due to the negligence of the opposite party. For example, if that particular good or service has harmed your health or life in some or the other way, then the consumer have the total right to get compensation for the loss suffered or injury suffered by the consumer. The fifth point, to pay punitive damage in appropriate circumstances. So what is punitive damage? Punitive damage is like when the court believes that only compensation for the loss suffered or injuries suffered is not sufficient for the loss which is suffered by the consumer, and for the unfair trade practice which the business person has followed. If the court believes that only compensation is not sufficient, so then the court will ask that business person or the business firm to pay punitive charges, which is the extra charges or extra fine above the compensation. So the sixth point, to discontinue the unfair or restrictive trade practice and not to repeat it in the future. For example, if the gas LPG gas dealer makes it compulsory to buy a gas stove with every cylinder or every two cylinder, so it is like unfair trade practices. It is a restrictive trade practice. So the consumer can file a case in the court against the LPG gas dealer and get justice for him, and he can force the LPG dealer to discontinue this particular type of unfair or restrictive trade practice. So the seventh point, not to offer hazardous good for sale. Hazardous good means those good which can cause damage to human life and human health. So those type of goods should not be sold. So the eighth point, to withdraw hazardous goods from sale. If if some hazardous goods are in the sale in the market, so that particular goods has to be withdrawn from the market so that it should not be sold to the consumer and thereby causing damage to human health or human life. So those goods which are already present in the market, which are very dangerous to the human health, should be withdrawn. The ninth point, to cease the manufacture of hazardous goods and to desist from offering hazardous services. Both hazardous goods and hazardous services should not be manufactured and not be offered. The 10th point, to pay any amount not less than 5% of the value of the defective good or deficient services provided to be credited to the Consumer Welfare Fund and any other organization person to be utilized in the prescribed manner. This point means he has to pay 5%. Who has to pay? The person who has lost the case in the court, the business person or the business concern who has done exploitation of the consumer. He has to pay the 5% of the defective 5% of the value of defective good or deficient services. So the 11th point, to issue corrective advertisement to neutralize the effect of a misleading advertisement. What is a misleading advertisement? Misleading advertisement is when the product which is shown in the advertisement is totally different from the reality product, which actual product. And also there is no note given in the advertisement regarding that the actual product may differ from the product which is shown in the advertisement, then it will be regarded as a misleading advertisement. So then when the consumer files the case against this misleading advertisement in the court may, upon verification, order the business concern to correct this advertisement which is misleading. So the 12th and the last point, to pay adequate cost to the appropriate party. So these were the various reliefs which are available to the consumer when the consumer is exploited by the business concern or the business person. So now we are going to start the second topic of today's class, that is role of consumer organization and NGOs. In India, there are several consumer organization and NGOs, non-government organization, which have been set up to protect and promote consumer interest. Non-government organizations are non-profit organizations who do not work for any profit. It is like only service, social service, which is provided to the consumers. They have a constitution of their own and are free from government interfere. So in NGOs, non-government organization, the government has no interference. They are free from government interference and have their own constitution. So the consumer protect organization and NGOs perform several functions for the protection and promotion of interest of consumers. So in order to make the consumer, in order to get their justice, in order to make the consumer get their reliefs, the consumer organizations and non-government organization perform several functions. So we are going to study them one by one again. So the first function, which is performed by consumer organization and NGOs, are educating the general public about their rights through through organizing training programs, seminars, or workshop. It is very important for the consumer to know their rights so that they can utilize their right at a time when they are being exploited by the business concern through unfair trade practices. The second function, which is performed by NGOs and consumer organization, are publishing periodical and other publication to impart knowledge about consumer problems, legal reporting, reliefs available, and matters of interest. They publish They publish various magazines, uh, notices, and advertisement so that they can add to the knowledge of the consumer regarding various consumer problems in the society and various reliefs available to them. So the third function which the consumer consumer organizations and NGOs perform is carrying out comparative testing of consumer products in accredited laboratories to test relative qualities of competing brands and publishing the test results for the benefits of the consumer. They test various products which are available in this market so that they can know about the quality of those particular goods and products. In They test this products in a very good laboratories, and after testing they also publish these results so that the consumer can benefit from these results, so that they can get to know which products are good in quality and which are not in good quality, and they can make a wise choice. The sixth point, encouraging consumer to strongly protest and take an action against unscrupulous, exploitative, and unfair trade practices of the seller. They encourage the consumer to fight against the exploitation of the business concerns and business person, and not to keep quiet after the exploitation has happened. So they help them in raising the voice, and they encourage them to strongly protest against this so that the unfair trade practices and exploitation can be stopped. The, the fifth point, providing legal assistance to consumer by way of providing aid, legal advice, etc. in seeking legal remedy. When a consumer wants to file a case in the consumer court after getting exploited by the business concerned through unfair trade practices. So these consumer organizations and NGO provide assistance by telling the entire procedure of filing the case, or how the proceeding is going to go on. So they are helping, they give legal advice and help them in seeking legal remedy. They help the consumers in getting the various reliefs which are available to them. So the sixth point, filing complaints in appropriate consumer courts on the behalf of the consumer. So these consumer organizations and NGOs file cases on the behalf of the consumers who do not, like for example, if a consumer is uneducated and has no knowledge about this consumer courts and all, he can approach these consumer organizations or NGOs. So these consumer organization and NGOs file case on behalf of these consumers. So the seventh point, taking an initiative in filing cases in consumer courts in the interest of the general public, not for any individual. For example, there is a famous product in the market. So that product consists of some defect and it is not suitable for consume and for use. So they file a case in the consumer courts on the behalf of the whole public in general, and not for one particular individual. It is for the it is for the whole society, it is for the whole public. So it is very, they play a very important role. The consumer organization and NGOs play a very important role in educating them, in helping consumers to get justice by getting by helps the consumer in getting various reliefs, and it creates pressure on the business organizations and business people to not to exploit the consumers and to ethically produce good goods at reasonable price, good quality goods and good quality services. So the role of these consumer organizations and NGO is very important in our society. So the next topic is some of the NGOs and consumer organization which are existing in India. There is a list of this, such as Consumer Coordination Council Delhi, Common Cause Delhi, Voluntary Organization in Interest of Consumer Education Delhi, Consumer Education and Research Center Ahmedabad, Consumer Protection Council Ahmedabad, Consumer Guidance Society of India, Mumbai, Mumbai Grahak Panchayat, Mumbai, Karnataka Consumer Service Society, Bangalore, Consumers Association, Kolkata, Consumer Unity and Trust Society, Jaipur. So, almost in every state in India, there are consumer organizations and non NGO working towards the benefit of the consumer. So, if a consumer gets exploited, they can approach these NGOs and consumer organization and seek help in getting justice for them and getting various reliefs which are available according to the law. So that's all in today's video. In today's video, we discussed various reliefs available to the consumer and the role of NGO and consumer organization. So thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please do subscribe, share and like the video.